Hello and welcome, Star People. This is APM, your intrepid star guide, and this is the Outlaw Astrology podcast, where we dismantle the astrological dogma and build a practice rooted in critical thinking, lived experience, and a radical honesty. So we're going to do a little recap of Arc 2. The Arc 2, we challenged the myth that squares and oppositions are punishments. They are reframed as friction, as fuel. Oppositions are invitations to wholeness, and squares are frictions as creative fuel. So this is Arc 3, starting right now, and this is where Outlaw Astrology earns its name. So, Arc 1 asked, what are we actually looking at? Arc 2 asked, what if the hard stuff is the good stuff? And Arc 3 asks the question, the biggest one yet, what does it mean to grow into your chart rather than be defined by it? But first, some housekeeping. This is episode 168, first episode of Arc 3. Subscribe, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with someone whose astrologer has told them that something about themselves that they've never been able to shake. Also, the newsletter called the Daily Stargazer has a free and paid version. There is an archive of over 160 posts and almost 100 private podcast episodes. So feel free to pop in there where all of the actions more and more starting to happen. So always appreciated. Likes, reviews, shares so that other people can find us, particularly on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And thank you very much for listening. And so here is the question we're going to start off with, or at least the setting intention, which is this: if anyone has ever handed you your chart and told you it's a verdict, that you don't have a choice, this is the energy you're living, you don't have a choice, etc., etc., this episode is for you. And now let's step on into it. So here's the problem. I think we've been reading charts wrong. Okay? It's a verdict problem, is how I see it. So here's a question that I bet most of you already know the answer to. And it's this: have you ever had a chart reading that left you feeling fixed, boxed in, stifled, like you've just been handed a personality sentence? This is the verdict problem. The chart reads like a document of who you are, not a map of what you're working with. And so, where does this come from? Well, traditional astrology inherited a deterministic worldview. Fate, fixed stars, the gods deciding your lot. Your chart was your destiny, full stop. But here's where that framing misses the mark entirely. Lived experience. That's it. The fact that you are not the same person at 45 that you were at 25, and that neither is your relationship to your chart. So, here's an example that you might recognize. Saturn in the first house at 19 feels like a cage. Too serious, too heavy, never quite fitting in, too many rules, too many regulations. The whole world is one big, fat, bloody no. You know you can't do that. No, you can't say that. No, you can't be that. No, you can't feel that. No, 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 no. Okay? Yet, at 45, it reads like hard-won authority, bone-deep integrity, a presence that people trust. Same placement, radically different, lived reality. So what happened? Well, here's what happened. The chart did not change. The person with the chart changed. And that changes everything. Absolutely everything. You see, in one case, you're handed a deterministic view. You have the sun in Pisces, which means for the rest of your life, forever and ever, amen, until the trees start speaking again and become the guardians of the world like they were in the dark fantasy horror series that I happen to love deeply and have loved since I was 6 years old. That sort of thing. Forever and ever, amen, no choice, you don't have a choice, too bad, this is what you got, this is your lot. I mean, there's a book. It is the bane of my existence. If I name the book, I mean, I can't, but... It's one of those books that's a cookbook, and it says Mars in Scorpio means you will be beheaded, or you will suffer burns, your house will burn down. See the tragedy? That's what I mean when I say fate and deterministic. I mean that sort of thing. Nobody is that good at being able to determine what you're going to experience in your life. That includes you. You're the only one who can guide it. You're the only authority on you. And yet we've got books out here being written as if this is all predetermined, prearranged, and nobody has a choice. Nobody. And the whole point of that was, as I said, deterministic. Back then, it made sense. Things were a lot more uncertain. And so any certainty you could possibly gather, and astrology back then was for the wealthy, not people without money, because the wealthy were the only people that could afford to engage an astrologer and also had big enough dreams, with quotes, that, oh, if I'm going to invade this country at this time, will it be auspicious? Will I end up victorious? That was the thinking of the time, and so that's what astrologers were paid to do. And a deterministic worldview kept society together, glued together, but that could sometimes be to the detriment of the people living it then as now. Okay, so as I've said, we had Saturn in the first house. Like I said, at 19, it's a cage. It's like the Ace of Swords. You know, no. But at 45, it's a totally different reading. It is those challenges against your personality. Now let me take it back a titch. The first house is your identity. Okay, it is the lens in which you look at the world. Which means Saturn there means there's going to be some hard knocks. There are going to be some hard lessons about who you are, because everybody around you is going to be very serious. And they're going to probably see you at 19 as older, capable, and more responsible than you actually are. Meaning that, no, you shouldn't do that. No. You know, that's just a no. You should know better. You're a responsible person. You're capable. You know, at 19, that's in prison. At 45, you'll be like, when someone says to you, when you got Saturn coming back round into your first house, or challenging it from the 7th or the 10th or the 4th, now it's a totally different thing. Now it's like, you've earned this wisdom. You've earned that seriousness. You've earned that worldview that everybody's broody, yes, but everybody leans on you, everybody sees you as responsible, everybody trusts you. Why? Because you tell it like it is. That would be Saturn in the first house. That worldview, the Saturn, is determining the lens. I have long goals. I'm willing to delay gratification. In 19, it feels imposing, intimidating, pushed upon. You feel like you're being crushed. By 45, you're a diamond. And you understand now that pushing and the purpose of it. And the difference is lived experience. So what happened? Did magic occur? No. The chart did not change. The person with the chart changed. And that changed everything. See, the map, which is a chart, is not the territory. The chart is a map of potential and not a blueprint of destiny. So we've all been taught that. We all have the idea that our charts are destiny and we can't escape and this is going to happen. And once upon a time that made sense. But does that make sense now? Absolutely not. It doesn't. So, which leads me to this point. Because we've been taught that charts are deterministic, we have now entered the myth of the fixed chart, which is potential versus fate. So here's the rub, and here's my position. Your chart is a map of potential. It is not a death sentence. It is not predetermined. It doesn't mean you're stuck with it, okay? You can choose to engage or not. You can choose to walk away completely if that's your choice, okay? So, let's talk about what potential actually means here when we say it. It's not a soft, feel-good reframe, okay? It's a precise, meaningful distinction. My Virgo placements wouldn't have it any other way, by the way, okay? So, we're not talking about, oh, you have the potential for so much, the kind of thing you tell children they can do anything they want. That's potential. You don't know what they're going to be, so anything is possible. But as you grow as a human, you start to understand that certain possibilities that were there when you were 19 suddenly become not possible or less possible when you're 35, for example. Okay, you want to travel the world at 25 and see every country. That's great. At 35, when you've got 2 kids, harder. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It means that just logistically it's more difficult, especially if these children are in school, in primary school particularly. Okay, that's going to be hard. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Just means how it's going to be done is going to be a very different thing. Okay, and so here potential means that that same placement can express in multiple ways across a lifetime. So Mars square Saturn isn't. You'll always struggle with authority. Or when you try to do something, when you try to assert yourself, you're always going to be pushed back against. Mars, Saturn, you're always going to be facing challenges and hard lessons. Okay? That sort of thing. What it is the raw material for learning when to push, when to pull, when to hold, how to build something that lasts under pressure. Okay, that's what that is. So, here's an invitation to change how we think about our charts and a placement or an aspect that you struggle with. What if it isn't who you are, but what you are learning to work with? Let me say it again. What if it isn't who you are, but what you're learning to work with? That's a very different reframe, a very different question, okay? And so the chart is not a map of the terrain, it is not a prediction of the journey. I misspoke. Let me say that again. The chart is a map of the terrain and not a prediction of the journey. That's how that is. So 2 people can have the same chart. They can walk the same terrain entirely differently depending on when they set out, what they're carrying, who they walk with, how their nervous system operates, that internal psychic architecture that you find in depth psychology from a Jungian, Freudian, Adlerian standpoint. That sort of thing. That will also determine how things are going to fall out, play out, etc. So, the essential variable here is lived experience. No astrologer can account for what you've lived through. That includes trauma, love, loss, grief, luck, geography, socioeconomic factors, culture, social mores, the morality, etc., the specific human beings that shaped you, the experiences that inform your choices. These are not written in the chart, and they change everything about how the chart expresses. So, here's the key point. What feels like a limitation at one stage of life can grow over time and with experience into one of your greatest strengths. This is not wishful thinking. This is how development actually works. And what a relief. Because if you're looking at your chart and you're thinking, No, I've got that aspect that 8 p.m. is discussing, and I've always thought that it's, the last time someone saw it, and I always thought, and what other people have told me, is this a bad aspect? First of all, there are no bad aspects. And there are also, technically, no good ones either, okay? So, it is all about lived experience. And that same great aspect that everybody's talking about is so wonderful can actually be a pain in the bum at the wrong time of life. So, an easy aspect can, like say, we got Venus and Jupiter having a meet-up, and it's in a trine position, and people are like, yeah, you're going to have all the money, and you're going to be loved, and etc. Not necessarily. You see, from the previous arcs, that's not the case. This can be complacency. This is, I've got no get up and go. There's no grit. There's no friction. And so I just got it. I know I got it, so I don't have to work as hard as someone else might for, love, beauty, values. That's Venus. Jupiter, expansion, beliefs. This is basically the aspect of what matters to you. Well, I don't have to worry about that. When you've got trines, I've got a trine here. I don't have to worry. You see, supportive, but it doesn't necessarily have any friction like the Mars-Saturn one I've mentioned. That's friction. That's being pushed against. That's going to make a diamond. The other one is going to be like a pea, putting a pea in a bunch of feather mattresses. Okay? Comfortable, nice, lovely, but may not do the job of giving you the grr, the friction, that's going to actually make action likely, possible, as well as making it likely and possible that it's going to be useful, helpful. You're going to learn, you're going to grow, which is the whole point of living. So, which leads me to this. There are two dimensions of change, and this is what I want to talk mostly about, okay? The two dimensions of change are the outer, which will be your transits, your cycles, the seasons of life, and the inner, maturity, healing, conscious work, okay? And the outer dimension, your chart isn't sitting still. It's in constant dialogue with time. Saturn returns, nodal cycles, moon phases, Jupiter transits. The chart is always being activated differently depending on where you are in your life's arc. And then there is the inner dimension. And this is the one most astrologers are underweight. And the inner work you do changes how your chart expresses. Full stop. So, when people talk about doing the work, that's what they mean. That is mitigating the parts of yourself that, let's just be honest, if you have a choice between eating delicious ice cream sundae and watching your favorite program, surrounded by all your favorite people, doing all your favorite things, are you going to go out there and do something hard? No, because that's an ancient thing. That's the wiring. Our nervous systems are wired because, animals are that way, and so too are we. If you're comfortable, feeling joyful, like a Venus, Jupiter, trine aspect, it's like you're on a hot rock, the sun is shining, the wind is a gentle breeze, nice and cool, but not too cool, and there are no predators around, and you've just had a lovely meal, or maybe you're having that lovely meal as you sit on your heated rock, enjoying the sunshine and the cool breeze, and just grooving and vibing. But that type of vibe doesn't build anything. It is the hard lessons. It is the challenges. Why? Because the challenges and the hard lessons is when we're most likely to learn something. So let's say we have a hard aspect between Venus and Jupiter. Let's make it an opposition, which is very Saturnine energy. That is basically integration and self-awareness. The likelihood that what matters to someone, like you got Venus, opposing Jupiter, Venus is going to see Jupiter as a little bit of a blowhard, a little bit too much, a little bit extra. And Jupiter is going to see Venus as soft, doesn't know what it wants, too easy building harmony and consensus to make a choice and a decision. Consider that Jupiter is also the outer planet here, and it will be enacting its energy on Venus for the sake of this example. So when you have that, what we're looking at is friction. And friction is the reason why you learn anything, grow as a person, or anything like that. It's the challenges that teach you. When you build a business and you have a hard time building that business, you learn things so that when challenge and you meet again, which you will meet challenge again if you're living, it's going to happen. If you meet challenge again, you know, okay, I got this. Whereas you've had no challenges in your life, you're going to be lost. You're going to be at a loss, okay? So that is why the work, the inner work, must be done. That's why it changes how the chart expresses, because the challenges will make us wiser, hopefully. And that change through that friction will change how we express anything that happens in our charts. And so here's a concrete example. Someone with the moon square Pluto at 25 years of age might experience it as emotional intensity that overwhelms them and others. Every feeling is a crisis. Every intimacy is a power struggle. At 40, after therapy, after grief work, after the slow work of self-knowledge, which only comes, once again, from critical thinking and lived experience and friction, that same Moon-Pluto square might read quite differently. In fact, it might read like this. And this is one of many examples, by the way. Profound emotional depth. The ability to sit with others in the darkest places, in the darkest moments, at the most uncomfortable. A capacity for transformation that most people never develop, meaning the capacity to change, to sit in the changes, because change is not comfortable. It's always, when I've done my self-help work, it's always great, wonderful, it's the most wonderful experience. It really isn't. It really isn't. It is uncomfortable. Example, consider a caterpillar going into its chrysalis, dissolving into differentiated goop of cells, and then having to build that chrysalis and then come out of it as a butterfly, but it just can't walk out of the chrysalis. No, it has to rip it open, and it is an arduous experience for the butterfly. It is not easy. It takes a while. And you know why that struggle exists? Because when the butterfly first emerges from the chrysalis, it is wet, it is goopy, it is slimy. It can't fly. Those wing joints can't support its body. The body is larger than the wings. So it's not in any position to be able to fly or do anything. And so through the struggle, the sun, the wind, starts to dry it off and pulling itself out, ripping itself out of its chrysalis. The wing joints get stronger. Its legs, its antennae, all of it starts to get stronger and comes online. So this butterfly has a greater chance of surviving this world, which is difficult. The animal world is no joke. It's very difficult. And it has a greater chance of surviving. And if it's a monarch butterfly, it's going to need that because it's going to go from Nova Scotia in Canada all the way to the same bleeding tree, all the way down in, I think, Brazil. And that's a long ride. And over generations getting there, to go back to the same place and to return back and forth between the two. So monarch butterflies are very steady creatures, and they wouldn't be steady, nor would any butterfly, if it didn't struggle first trying to get out of that bleeding chrysalis, which takes hours. Sometimes the butterfly will literally sit there and pant for hours after struggling to get out, but it makes them stronger. It makes them sturdier. Consider yourself to be like that butterfly. If you had the Moon-Pluto square in your chart, wherever you see the square, wherever you see the opposition, you are being tested like the butterfly coming out of a chrysalis. It is not to punish you. It is to make you stronger, to give you endurance, to give you the challenge so you can think on your feet. So that when challenge meets you again, you can stand there and sit with it, think your way through it, and move forward or sideways or whatever you need to do. Okay, so that same aspect that I was talking about, that Moon-Pluto, it's the same aspect at 25, but at 40, it has a completely different expression. The difference is in the life lived in between that 25 and that 40. That's 15 years. That's basically a dash. In that dash, that experience, that lived experience, informs that 40-year-old person's expression of that same Moon-Pluto, but differently, more nuanced, with more control and agility. Okay? So, here's an invitation. Think of something you've always considered a difficult placement in your chart. So, choose whatever. Everybody's got a problem child in their chart. Choose your problem child, or choose the one that's curious, whatever works for you. But ask yourself this. How old were you when you first heard it described that way, that it could be a difficult placement? And how much living have you done since then? Has it shifted? And I have that. I have a Moon-Pluto conjunction. Now, a conjunction is a fusion of energy, which means what wires together, fires together, what fires together, wires together, which means these two things operate as if they are the same thing. I tend to think my feelings and feel my thoughts, okay? And this is intensity. When I was younger, emotions were huge. It's like watching a giant tidal wave coming right down on me. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with that? However, I am... Years have passed since I was in my, clearly my 20s. I've had life experience, and so what was once a giant wave falling upon me, about to cover me on the beach, is now discernment. It's like, do I really require this level of intensity for this particular interaction? Do I need to go full-on screamy, or do I need to hold back? How do I need to express my anger? How do I need to express my feelings in this particular situation? Because Pluto is the shaper of the moon in this one. The outer planet always shapes the expression of the inner planet all the time. That's what happens. So Pluto's intense. So, did I have people using my emotions to control me? Yep, check. Did I have people telling me how to feel? Yep, check. Did I have people attempting to dominate my emotional realm and, just because to make themselves feel happy and comfortable? Yes, check. Moon is also about an inherited. What inherited experiences did I have with the moon, with power, with control, with transformation? It was uncomfortable. Transformation was to be feared. Power and control were to be bowed to and deferred to and submitted to. And that's a problem. When you're in your 20s, you're going to want to push against that, because the whole point of your 20s is to find out what you believe, what you value. So yes, you're going to fight that. Yes, it's going to feel oppressive. But years later, I experienced that same Moon-Pluto as discernment. I see manipulation. So now I'm better able to notice when someone is attempting to do something to manifest to control me for their own comfort, because it's easy, convenient, and comfortable for them. So now that Moon-Pluto does not have to be oppressive. It can also be transformative, okay, I see that manipulation's involved, or I see there's a power control issue here. How do I wish to proceed? How do I wish to respond? Okay? And so, the chart is not a verdict. It is a living document in dialogue with your evolving self and your evolving life. And so here's the point. You are the only authority in your life. You're the only authority in your chart. The only person that actually knows you from the inside out, which is the only way you can know anyone and anything, is you. And that means you're the only one that knows your chart. And so your opinion is the only opinion that matters at the end of the day. Okay? So, no one, no astrologer, no system, no tradition. When I say no astrologer, I mean also myself. Any system, including my system, any tradition, even the ones that I'm teaching you, has more authority over your chart than you do, because you have lived it. I haven't lived it. I've lived a totally different life. Okay? That's how that is. So this doesn't mean that astrologers aren't useful. It doesn't mean astrology isn't useful. They absolutely are. It absolutely is. A skilled astrologer can illuminate patterns, offer language, help you name things, reflect things back to you that you haven't seen. But the final word is always yours. The problem with giving away that authority, when you hand your chart to someone to interpret as a fixed truth, you outsource your own self-knowledge, your own intuition, your own gut instincts. You stop being the author of your story and start becoming a character in someone else's interpretation of that story. The chart is a tool. You are an artisan, a craftsperson. The tool does not use you, you use it. And so, here's a reframe. Instead of asking, what does my chart say about me? Ask, what does my chart offer me to work with right now, given where I am in my life right now? Now that is a small, yet significant shift. The first question, what does my chart say about me, positions you as a passive receiver. The second question, what does my chart offer me to work with right now, given where I'm in my life and in who I am? That one offers you a position to be an active participant. You see the difference? One, you're just actively along for the ride. The other, you're behind the wheel. Okay. And we have come to the end of this episode 1 of Arc 3. And so here's the key takeaway here. Your chart is a map of potential, not a verdict on who you are. Living and lived experience, timing and lived experience as well, change everything. You are not always the prime authority on you are always the prime authority on your own chart, because you're the one who has lived it. Let me repeat that. Your chart is a map of potential, not a verdict on who you are. Timing and lived experience changes everything, and you are always the prime authority on your own chart, because you are the one who has lived it, you and no one else. Okay, so here's some questions to take to your grimoire, to your journal. Pick one placement or aspect in your chart that you've always experienced as difficult, fixed, one that makes you feel stuck, and journal on this. How old were you when you first received that interpretation? What has your lived experience of it actually been? Not what you were told it would be, but what has actually happened, what has genuinely occurred across the seasons of your life. Has it shifted? Has it grown? Has it surprised you? Write it down. You are building evidence for your own chart. This is the work of this particular arc, which is Arc 3. And so next episode is episode 169, and we're going to put the chart in context. So we're going to look at transits, progressions, cycles, and they are always in dialogue with who you actually are in your life. This is not what does my chart say, it's what does my chart say about me right now. The chart is a living, seasonal, ever unfolding document, not a personality test result. It is a conversation. And now a little housekeeping before we go. The newsletter, the podcast, please like, share, subscribe, review so that others can find us and benefit and enter into the conversation as well. Thank you very much for listening. Stay curious, stay critical, stay in your authority. The map is yours. I'm APM. Peace and astro magic. Star people.